Hey guys, this is my first ever YouTube video that I'll be uploading, so please ignore the very shoddy video quality. Just wanted to get all my thoughts out there on the Dodgers signing Yamamoto for $325 million while they're still fresh on my mind. So, one of my biggest curiosities moving forward with the Dodgers' long-term plan upon this signing is what is going to become of all their amazing starting pitching prospects moving forward. A lot of people, casual fans might not know this. I'm a Yankee fan, but yeah, still, I follow every team pretty much. They might think the Dodgers are signing these guys because they don't have any great young pitchers to step up. Or maybe most of their great young pitching prospects have graduated and by, guys like Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin. But, as most scouts will agree on at this point, the Dodgers to date have one of the best farm systems in all of baseball, particularly when it comes to starting pitching. They have, just looking at their top prospect list right now, they have guys like Nick Frasso, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Landon Knack, Peyton Martin, Kyle Hurt, Rowan Kopp, Maddox Bruns, Justin Robleski, so on and so forth. Most of their top 30 prospect list is comprised of pitchers, and most of those guys reading their scouting reports are pretty high upside pitchers, which is to say guys who have the potential to be great if everything works out. A lot of their profiles are not too dissimilar to guys like Walker Buehler, Bobby Miller, Emmett Sheehan. A lot of the guys the Dodgers have churned out semi-recently or recently, guys with great change-ups, for example, etc. Now, you might say, oh, but they're just prospects, right? That's the argument everyone always gives is, oh, well, they're just prospects. The Dodgers should leverage their prospects to get sure things. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a sure thing. Especially when you're signing guys that are coming off arm injuries and guys that are 30-plus years old in the form of Tyler Glasnow and Shohei Ohtani. But also, if there's any team whose prospects should have some weight, it would be the Dodgers, right? The Dodgers are one of these pitching factory teams like the Rays, the Braves, the Astros, where every year they seem to have one or two new amazing young starting pitchers eating up a lot of their innings. And not only have they been able to consistently produce major league starting pitchers from their farm system, they've been able to consistently produce elite major league starting pitchers, right? Julio Urias, Tony Gonsolin, guys who were in recent Cy Young voting. Produced internally, not making a whole lot of money. Okay, Dustin May, Walker Buehler. You can go all the way back to Clayton Kershaw, who they've spent a lot of money to retain, but he was homegrown. And last year, Bobby Miller and Emmett Sheehan, more recent examples. So the Dodgers are just a machine when it comes to acquiring young starting pitching talent and getting the absolute best out of it. Which is why I thought it was so interesting that them, of all people, would spend over $1 billion in 1 month, right? Unprecedented levels of starting pitching on pitchers, right? Which they're so good at producing internally for reasonably cheap. And, obviously they have some holes in their starting rotation for next year that they had to fill, but they could have easily filled that internally for a fraction of the cost. I mean, they could have rolled out a guy like Ryan Pepio, who they traded in the Tyler Glasnow deal. Sheehan pitched well towards the end of last year. They still have Buehler. They still have Bobby Miller. They have Ryan Yarbrough, who had a good year last year that they traded for. They might get Kershaw back at some point. So, they won 106 games last year. They would have had a competitive team. They would have been division favorites without most of these giant signings. So if there's anything I will give them credit for, although they're clearly becoming the evil empire of the league at this point, think of what the Yankees used to be. They are not cheap, okay? They are willing, and they value their prospects a lot. They could have easily traded prospects to get a guy like Dylan Cease. They could have acquired a lot of the same talent level they did this offseason without spending as much money as they did. They spent as much money as they did, obviously in part because they're so high on guys like Ohtani and Yamamoto and Glasnow. They wouldn't have signed those guys for as much money as they did or traded for Glasnow if they didn't think the world of them. but also because they would rather spend money than get gypped off, trading away packages of great starting pitching prospects as a bargain price just because they have to get rid of them because they can't keep them all on their 40-man roster. With that being said, it raises the question of, well, what becomes of those starting pitching prospects, right? I mean, uh, sorry, I might have been covering up the mic for some of this. I hope I didn't blur the sound. Whatever, I'm just going to keep going with it. They now have their starting rotation locked up for indefinitely, right? Shohei Ohtani's under contract for 10 years. Yamamoto's under contract for 12 years. Glass now for 6. You also have guys like Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin coming off of arm surgeries. They'll be back next year. They might, keep signing Clayton Kershaw until he retires. We don't know. We have no idea when he's going to retire. So flash forward to their rotation next year, right? Buehler's a free agent. My guess is he'll walk and they'll give him a qualifying offer. Try to get a draft pick back for him. But they have, projected for next year, let's assume one arm injury. But you got Bobby Miller, you got Ohtani, you got Glasnow, you got Yamamoto. Maybe Clayton Kershaw, maybe Tony Gonsolin, maybe Dustin May, but at the very least, Emmett Sheehan is probably their starting pitching prospect, high upside starting pitching prospect, with the closest major league future. But they still have 5 to 10 to 15 excellent starting pitching prospects just sitting around in their farm system, right? Like there was a clear path to those guys filling the void. There no longer is. What are they going to do with them all, right? They can't keep all of them. And the other thing, this is a conundrum where it always used to be, okay, if you had like great starting pitching prospects but no starting pitching spots, you'd stick them in the bullpen. You end up sticking a lot of these guys in the bullpen. But the Dodgers also have a jam-packed bullpen. They will for a long time. I didn't even mention a guy like Michael Grove, for example, who pitched really well out of the bullpen last year, will probably be a reliever for them moving forward. So, yeah, I mean, I just thought it was interesting. It really points to their business model, how they view the game of baseball strategically from a talent acquisition perspective. Because the last few years, last year specifically, they cut back financially. They tried to get under the luxury tax. They ended up going over the luxury tax a little bit because they spent so much money on Trevor Bauer. I mean, think of how good their rotations have been. And that's without the $40 million they spent on Trevor Bauer, who is supposed to be one of their big acquisitions recently. So this is not a team that's ever hurting for starting pitching. But, last year they spent a lot less money than they could have. And to me, it raised the question of, okay, well, what does that mean for most people thought it was because they were going to go crazy after Ohtani this year, which ended up being absolutely correct. But I wondered if, Andrew Friedman is their, president of baseball operations, I think. I don't think he's their GM. I don't know who the GM is, but he used to be with the Rays. He's a great Moneyball guy who now has a ton of money to spend. I started to think, all right, well, are the Dodgers going to try to move more in the direction of a team like the Rays? Are they going to try to continue producing great talent internally, not try to get these entrenched in these mega deals with guys that are going to, be there through their age 40 seasons? Are they going to, obviously they have they've proven that they have basically infinite money to spend, but that doesn't mean they have to spend it. I mean, I didn't know if their owners would be like, hey, maybe let's try to win without spending $1 billion. But clearly that, is not an obstacle to them. And a big question for me is, are they going to be any better off for it at the end of the day, right? I get the logic of, is there as many great starting pitching prospects, as much upside as they have in the Dodgers farm system right now? Would you take any of them over Tyler Glasnow for the next 5 years? Would you take any of them over Yamamoto? No. The answer to that is clearly no. None of them project to be as good as those guys, but as we've learned from teams like the Rays, who can win year over year over year without these so-called established star players, talent is all about strength and numbers, especially in 2023, with so much talent in the game, so much international talent. Like, you could have one established great starting pitcher, albeit with health problems, and a guy like Tyler Glasnow. And is he probably going to be better than Emmett Sheehan? Yeah. Or any of the other individual starting pitching prospects the Dodgers have. But is he going to be better than all of them? Would you take him over the field? I wouldn't, especially at age 30, and especially for how much money he's making. Right? I mean, maybe you'd take him over the field for the next couple of years, but he's on a 6-year deal. In 4 years, honestly, who do you think is going to be producing at a higher level? A 34, 35-year-old Tyler Glasnow, or one of the borderline 20 super high ceiling starting pitching prospects that the Dodgers have, right? Well, ones that they've given away. They traded away, they just gave away Ryan Pepio, who looked great towards the end of last year. I think he's got a lot of upside. The Rays know what they're doing. He could theoretically be just as good as Glasnow someday. Okay, I would take Glasnow if I had to pick the two of them, but it's not an absurd notion to insinuate that he could be just as good, albeit with a very different approach. He's more of a control guy and a changeup guy rather than a breaking ball guy. But looking at their roster here, I mean, I'm not sure, obviously, I completely lost my track of thought here. This is why, YouTubers work a lot. They have scripts and they have high camera quality and they don't just wing it like this, but that's all right. The question at the end of the day I have for the Dodgers is, are they going to get better results from these three guys than they would from the field, right? From all of the young, great starting pitching prospects that they have, anybody else who they could have signed that they didn't sign, not just this year, but over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. I mean, there have been a lot of teams that have tried this super rotation strategy. Okay, my team, the Yankees, did it recently. They tried to get, Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon and Luis Severino and Frankie Montas and Domingo Germán and Jordan Montgomery and all their great young starting pitching prospects all on the same team, all at the same time. And it didn't work out. Right? And, today's great is tomorrow's good, and tomorrow's good is the next day's bad. So, the Garrett Cole signing is still working out. I mean, he's a creme de la creme player, obviously, but, for how long, right? I mean, the pitchers just keep getting better and better. Stuff keeps getting better and better. And also, pitchers obviously get worse as they age, and to retain these established guys, you have to pay them a crap load of money, right? Where have the Yankees, who've had this strategy, been any better than the Rays over the last 10 years with regards to their starting rotations? No. Okay, the Yankees spend a massive amount of money on Garrett Cole. They spend a massive amount of money on Carlos Rodon. They trade a ton of great prospects to get Frankie Montas. What did the Rays do to get their great rotation? Tyler Glasnow, a guy that they gave up an established player to get, right? Shane McClanahan, homegrown. Jeffrey Springs, they got in a crazy bargain deal. Drew Rasmussen, a brilliant trade. I mean, the Rays are doing, they have the exact opposite strategies as super teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers. The Yankees and the Dodgers, it's all about, let's spend as much money as we have for the best starting pitchers, which really just means the guys who had the best years last year and guys who we think are going to have the best years moving forward, but people are wrong about that all the time. I mean, how many starting pitchers have been consistently the best over the last 5 years, let alone 10 years? Very few. I mean, there's a crazy amount of fluctuation. And every year there are new guys who burst onto the scene and are just as good as the best old guys, right? And again, the Rays have proven this. Like it's not just that they are churning out young pitchers who can hang with the no, they're churning out young pitchers that are just as good, if not better, than other teams are paying $40 million for, or giving up their absolute best prospects in bulk for. So, and it's not like they're getting top draft picks year after year either. Like, it would make sense if they were tanking like the Orioles did for 5 years, but no, they're consistently winning and consistently spending under $100 million. The Dodgers and Yankees are spending, and Mets, or teams like that are spending close to over 3 times as much and not getting any superior results. Is this ultimately a foolhardy decision for the Dodgers, or is this the Dodgers striking while the iron's hot, pushing all in, while they already have this foundation of great young prospects, great young pitchers? Time will tell. I mean, I think that they brought in an incredibly high level of talent. I'm personally very high on Shohei Ohtani. I'm personally very high on Glasnow. I've never seen Yamamoto pitch, but he's only 25 years old, which is great. So I'm high on the guys that they brought in, but again, what lessons can we learn from teams that have recently spent crazy numbers of money on established guys and have gotten middling results? Like the Mets with Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. Again, like, it's not a problem for them because they have the best of both worlds right now. They have maybe the best rotation on baseball for 2025. Next year it remains to be seen, but in 2025 you're going to have Ohtani, Yamamoto, Bobby Miller, Emmett Sheehan, Tyler Glasnow, maybe Clayton Kershaw, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin. Their rotation is going to be absolutely nuts. But when you commit to guys like that, what you automatically don't have is you automatically don't have all the pitchers in your farm system, right? This is something that people don't realize about anchoring yourself with giant mega deals to specific starting pitchers for years and years and years. People think, oh, well, the Dodgers haven't traded away any of their starting pitching prospects, so what's the harm in bringing in a guy like Glasnow, bringing in a guy like Yamamoto? If those guys turn out to not be better than your starting pitching prospects, you can just play your starting pitching prospects. That's not how it works, because you can't keep all of your starting pitching prospects. There's 40-man roster rules. And so when you sign a Yamamoto and you bring in an Ohtani, Glasnow, these guys are automatically pitching, period. They are going to be pitching. They're going to be pitching for years. Anybody the Dodgers could produce internally are going to end up in the bullpen. Some of those guys are going to end up claiming rotation spots because, due to injury, or some guys that'll leave eventually, right? Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May aren't under contract for too much longer. But the Dodgers, without a doubt, if they haven't already, right, and giving up guys like Nick Nastrini to the White Sox at the trade deadline last year, Clayton Beeter to the Yankees after that, the Dodgers are going to give away elite starting pitching talent from their own farm system in the upcoming years. That cannot be denied. When you have as many great starting pitchers as they do, and you can't stick them all in the bullpen, and your rotation is absolutely booked for the next decade, almost, they're going to have to trade a lot of these starting pitchers, and they're not going to be able to get optimal value on all of them, right? That's the other big perk of a system that the Rays have, is that when you play great young pitching prospects and they succeed, their value goes up tremendously. There is a tremendous difference just between a guy who's dominated in AAA versus a guy who's dominated in AAA and had 10 dominant starts at the major league level. There's a huge difference that teams view those guys with in terms of security, in terms of what they're able to give up for them. Right? Ryan Pepio ended up being the centerpiece of the Tyler Glasnow trade because of his, I think he had like 5 starts at the end of last year. Like, not a big sample size at all. He could revert right back to how he pitched the year before that with the Dodgers, which was solid but less remarkable. He was always considered more of a high floor guy than a high upside guy with respect to all of the other pitchers the Dodgers have, right? Like Bobby Miller, Emmett Sheehan. Their stuff is ridiculous. Those are guys that could be just as good as Glasnow and Ohtani someday. Pepio was seen as maybe a guy who's going to be a number 3 starter at best. But last year, I mean, with how he dominated in a small sample size, how elite his changeup is, like, he showed that maybe he can be more than that. And I don't think the Rays would have asked for him if they didn't think that he could be more than that. And there's no organization in baseball more qualified than the Rays than to turn him into that. But when you allow your young pitching prospects to pitch at the major league level, not only are you giving yourself to internally produce somebody with just as much upside as a Tyler Glasnow without spending that money, but you are also giving yourself the chance to increase their value. If all you ever do is trade prospects who've never pitched at the major league level, right, and guys who get backed up, like, this is what happens to teams that like hold on to their prospects too long. If you have a guy who dominates in AAA when he's 23, and then, okay, well, now there's just no spot for him, so we're going to unfairly to him, we're going to stick him in AAA again. Well, if he already dominated at age 23, what's he going to do at age 24 to really boost his stock? He can't. He can only hurt his stock, unless he just has another equally dominant season, which doesn't always happen, right? Motivation also becomes an issue at that point. So you really have to play them at the major league level, not only to give yourself a chance to find the next big thing, but to have them maintain their value, right? And the Dodgers, fortunately for them, a lot of their starting pitching prospects aren't as close to the major league level, but a lot of them are. They're going to have to make a quick decision on a lot of these guys soon. You look at Nick Frasso, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Landon Knack, Kyle Hurt. Those are their best pitching prospects according to MLB.com. They all have ridiculous stuff. They all have super high upside. You saw Kyle Hurt and Gavin Stone at the major league level last year in short bursts. You saw the potential there. A lot of these guys are current or former top 100 prospects. So these are going to be the next Walker Buehlers and Bobby Millers of the world someday. Some of them are. They aren't all going to be. But those are all guys that finished off the year in AAA last year. Most of them dominated in AAA last year, and most of them are over the age of 24. So almost all of those guys, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in Kyle Hurt. Peyton Martin doesn't fit into that. That's 5 guys. Not even mentioning Michael Grove, who they're either going to have to put on the roster or trade very soon. And some of those guys are going to be absolute studs, and they're not going to have a chance to audition them all for other teams in an ideal scenario like they did with Ryan Pepio this year. So those are just that's my gut reaction, my questions. When I look at the Dodgers signing Shohei, Yamamoto, trading for Tyler Glasnow, Do I think they've gotten better? Without question, they've gotten better for next year and probably for the next few years. But these guys aren't just under contract for the next few years. They're under contract for the next decade, some of them, or more, in Yamamoto's case. And you still have Freeman under contract for a long time. You still have Betts under contract for a long time. These guys are all going to get old at the same time. This is what happened to the Yankees not long ago. I mean, it continues to happen to the Yankees to some extent. And so at some point, you're going to have a bunch of guys pushing 40, all making over $25 million a year. Maybe it just doesn't matter. Maybe the Dodgers have so much money and so much pull with Major League Baseball that they're going to go way over the luxury tax someday. Maybe they'll be the first team to spend $400 million someday. And also with inflation, with no idea how that's going to affect all these things, right? I mean, we're playing with fuddy-duddy money here to some extent. Like, Shohei's money is deferred. I hopefully for everyone, including myself and my own bank account, inflation comes down. But if it doesn't come down or if it gets worse, like right now, inflation's like, what is it, 4, 5, 6% or something like that? Like if there's 6% inflation in 10 years, like that Ohtani money is going to be dramatically less than what it's worth now. So maybe the Dodgers, it doesn't matter if they lose talent in this process because they can always just sign. But I think there is a possibility, a very real possibility, that they are spending $1 billion in 1 month and getting really not too much better for it in the long run, right? Because again, are Ohtani, Glasnow, and Yamamoto probably going to be elite starting pitchers? Probably. For how long? We don't know. There's also injury concerns with Yamamoto because he's only 5'10" with Glasnow and Ohtani because they recently had Tommy John surgeries. But an equally important question is, okay, are they going to be good? Sure. Are they going to be any better than, let's say Bobby Miller and Emmett Sheehan cracked their rotation moving forward? Are they going to be any better than Ryan Pepio, Nick Frasso, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Landon Knack, Kyle Hurt, and all the other guys that are going to fly through their farm system in the next 5 years? Guys they haven't even drafted yet that are going to be knocking on the door. And also guys they've traded away in Nick Nastrini and Clayton Beeter and guys like Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin who might not get a fair shake. I mean, is Ohtani, Glasnow, and Yamamoto really going to be any better than that? What's going to prevail in the long run, the Dodgers' business model or the Rays' business model? The Rays' starting pitching has been just as good as the Dodgers has. So have the Braves and the Astros. And these are all teams whose rotations have primarily consisted of homegrown talent for the last 5 years at least, and they've been dominating just as much as the Dodgers have, at least in the playoffs, more than the Dodgers have. And the Dodgers had more in common with these teams until this December. Until this December, they were kind of doing the same thing, producing internal talent, trading guys at the peak of their value, right? If they can't fit a guy into their starting rotation, then trade them at the peak of their value by having them audition at the major league level and strutting their stuff and then flipping them to another team. They have about faced with that business model. They've spent over $1 billion, and we'll see if they're any better for it, because they might not be. That is all.